Have you ever been laughed at for receiving something so worthless? People thought you'd never recover, only for that very thing to become the key to your freedom? That's exactly what happened to Evelyn Brooks, a woman whose story proves that sometimes the ugliest package hides the most priceless treasure. The morning of her husband Daniel's funeral felt like a storm even before the clouds broke. Evelyn stood beside the open grave, her black dress clinging to her 7-month pregnant belly, one hand gripping an umbrella that did little against the drizzle, the other resting protectively on her son's small shoulder. 10-year-old Marcus leaned against her, trembling as if the weight of the world sat on his narrow frame. The murmurs of the gathered crowd cut deeper than the cold rain. "Such a shame," whispered one. "Poor woman, but she won't last a month without him," another muttered, not softly enough for Evelyn to miss. Across the grave stood Daniel's family, her in-laws. Their faces looked carved from stone, their black clothes tailored as though the funeral were a gala. Not a single tear glistened in their eyes. Evelyn knew better than to expect warmth from them. They had opposed her from the day she married Daniel, never forgiven her for not coming from a proper family. They mocked her when she worked late nights with him, helping build their little flower business from nothing. And now, in the darkest hour of her life, they stared at her like she was a trespasser. When the final shovelful of dirt landed on Daniel's coffin, Evelyn's shoes were soaked, her heart as heavy as the mud beneath her feet. But she clung to one hope. Daniel had surely protected her in his will. He had always promised that their children would be safe. The lawyer's office smelled faintly of coffee and dust. Evelyn sat stiffly, Marcus holding her hand as the lawyer adjusted his glasses and opened the folder. "To my wife, Evelyn Brooks," he read aloud, "I leave our home on Willow Street, all my shares in Brooks Floral Designs, and the 1972 van." Relief loosened her chest. The house, the business, and yes, the old van that Daniel never stopped tinkering with. It was sentimental, but to her, it was security. But then, a sharp laugh cut through the air. Her sister-in-law leaned back in her chair, exchanging a look with her brother. "Oh no," she said, venom dripping from her voice. "That's not how this is going to work." "Excuse me?" Evelyn whispered. Her father-in-law leaned forward, his tone clipped like a hammer striking steel. "The house and the business are family property. Daniel may have written them into a will, but you married into this family. That means you own nothing. The only thing you get is that worthless van." The lawyer frowned. "That's not exactly—" "Enough," the old man snapped, cutting him off. "If you want to make this a fight, Evelyn, take us to court. But let's see how far you get. Pregnant, penniless, and with a child to feed." The room spun. Marcus squeezed her hand until his knuckles turned white. Evelyn opened her mouth, but no words came. They were daring her to fight, but she knew this was their territory, their money, their lawyers, their connections. She'd already seen how ruthless they could be when cornered. 15 minutes later, Evelyn walked out into the drizzle with nothing but a set of van keys clutched in her hand, the sound of their cruel laughter chasing her into the gray streets. The van sat at the far end of the parking lot like a wounded animal, rusted, sagging, forgotten. Its paint bubbled, the driver's mirror held with duct tape, one back door hanging loose. Evelyn ran her fingers along its side, and rust crumbled under her touch. This was her inheritance. "Mom," Marcus whispered, his voice small, "we're not really living here, are we?" Evelyn swallowed hard. She couldn't lie. She opened the van door and the smell of mildew, oil, and time wrapped around them. Inside, the cracked vinyl seats and dusty dashboard whispered of abandonment. But to her, it whispered of survival. She saw Daniel's fingerprints pressed faintly into the dust of the dashboard. He had spent hours here, calling it their safety net. She had never understood what he meant until now. That night, she parked the van behind an abandoned hardware store. The mist clung to the windows as she wrapped Marcus in a blanket and settled on the narrow bench seat in the back. Her belly shifted with the baby's kicks, reminding her she had no time to break. Through the van's thin metal walls, she overheard passing voices. "Isn't that Daniel's widow?" "Yeah, lost everything. Her in-laws threw her out. I guess she'll be begging soon." Evelyn clenched her jaw, staring at the ceiling. She wouldn't give them that satisfaction. The next days blurred into survival. She woke before dawn, scoured bulletin boards for cleaning jobs, carried groceries for strangers, even arranged flowers for pennies, her hands remembering skills she had once used to build a thriving shop. At night, she returned to the van, where Marcus drew little stick figures on the fogged-up windows. It was during one of those evenings when Evelyn was scrubbing the back door with a sponge, trying to make the space less suffocating, that she noticed it. The sponge caught on a jagged patch of rust. She pushed harder, peeling away flakes, only to freeze. Beneath the rust glimmered something strange. Not the dull gray of steel, but something denser, warmer, almost glowing. Her heart hammered. She rubbed again, exposing a sliver of golden sheen. It couldn't be. She blinked, leaned closer. It was gold. Real, heavy, unyielding gold. Daniel's words echoed in her mind. This van is our safety net. For a long moment, Evelyn just stared. She didn't shout. She didn't smile. She simply whispered, "Not yet," because this wasn't just a discovery. It was a secret powerful enough to change everything, but only if she kept it close. And so, Evelyn's life took a turn her in-laws never imagined. They thought they had humiliated her by throwing her into the streets with a rusted van. What they didn't know was that inside that rusted shell lay not just gold, but her path to freedom. And let me just pause here. I have to say, when I reflect on this moment, I can't help but admire Evelyn's restraint. Most people, myself included, would have run screaming to a jeweler right away. But Evelyn understood something powerful. Not every victory needs to be loud. Some wins are safest in silence until the time is right. That silence was about to become her strongest weapon. Evelyn woke the next morning with a strange calm in her chest. The discovery she'd made the night before wasn't just about money. It was about dignity. She had been stripped of her home, her business, and her pride in front of an entire town. But the gold hiding inside that van gave her something her in-laws could never take away. The chance to fight back on her own terms. But here's the thing. She didn't rush. She didn't let her excitement show, not even to Marcus. Why? Because Evelyn knew that sometimes when life hands you a secret weapon, the best move is patience. If she had flaunted her discovery, people would talk. And when people talk, greed listens. So she went about her days as if nothing had changed. She cleaned houses, carried groceries, smiled politely while people whispered behind her back. At night, when Marcus was asleep, she quietly worked on the van. She chose a hidden corner of the rear door and pried loose a strip of the gleaming metal, small enough to hide in her coat pocket. The next day, she walked to a discreet jeweler across town, a man known for paying cash, no questions asked. She laid the strip on the counter, her heart hammering. The jeweler's eyebrows shot up, but he didn't ask where it came from. He waited, scribbled a number on a slip of paper, and pushed it toward her. Evelyn's breath caught. The amount was more than she'd earned in months of hard labor. With trembling hands, she accepted the cash, but instead of splurging, she used it wisely. Fresh clothes for Marcus, prenatal vitamins for herself, and enough food to fill their stomachs without rationing crumbs. For the first time in weeks, Marcus fell asleep with a full belly. His small body finally relaxed against the van's bench seat. And here's where I stop to reflect, because this moment, to me, is what resilience looks like. Evelyn could have wasted that money in bitterness, trying to prove herself to those who mocked her. But instead, she invested in the quiet things that mattered: her child's dignity, her baby's health, and her own determination. That's a lesson many of us could use. Over the weeks, Evelyn repeated the process, removing tiny strips of gold and selling them. Not too much, never enough to draw suspicion. With the second sale, she saved enough to rent a small stall at a street market. She bought secondhand vases, a few buckets, and wholesale flowers. And just like that, Evelyn returned to the trade she loved most. She arranged roses, lilies, tulips, her fingers moving with a memory so natural it felt like Daniel was guiding her hands. Customers noticed immediately. "Who's the new florist?" they whispered. "She's got an eye for beauty." At first, they didn't recognize her. But then, someone did. "Isn't that Daniel Brooks' widow? I thought she was living in a van." Whispers spread, but Evelyn didn't flinch. She had endured worse. If anything, the whispers fueled her fire. Day after day, she opened her stall before sunrise and stayed until the streets emptied. She remembered names, birthdays, anniversaries. And little by little, people began coming not just for flowers, but for her warmth, her attention, the way she made them feel seen. Meanwhile, across town, her in-laws were choking on their own greed. The business they had stolen from her began collapsing. Orders went unfilled, debts piled high, suppliers refused to work with them. Customers whispered about how Brooks Floral was falling apart. Figures, one said at Evelyn's stall. They never worked a day in their lives. Evelyn said nothing, only smiled faintly while trimming the stems of daisies. Inside, though, she felt a quiet satisfaction, because while their empire crumbled, hers was slowly blossoming again. By the time her daughter was born, Evelyn's small stall had transformed into a sunlit corner shop with a painted green awning. She named it Marcus and Rose after her two children. Inside, the air was sweet with eucalyptus, peonies, and lavender. Customers came not just for bouquets, but for the joy she created. Every arrangement came with a sprig of baby's breath for luck, a quiet tradition she had started herself. And still, the van sat under the same leaning lamppost, its rusted shell hiding the fortune that had built her new life. To the world, it was just an old relic. To Evelyn, it was the secret her late husband had left her, the one thing her in-laws could never steal. Then one crisp autumn afternoon, as golden leaves swirled down the street, Evelyn looked up from wrapping a bride's bouquet and froze. Standing in the doorway of her shop was her father-in-law. His once powerful frame had shrunk, his suit worn at the elbows. Behind him trailed her sister-in-law, stripped of her usual arrogance, her eyes darting nervously around the shop. "Evelyn," her father-in-law began, his voice softer than she had ever heard it. "We've, fallen on hard times. The house is gone. The business, too. We need a place to stay, just until we get back on our feet." The audacity of it almost made her laugh, but Evelyn didn't laugh. Instead, she tied the ribbon around the bouquet in her hands, her movements steady, her expression calm. Finally, she looked up. "I remember," she said quietly, "the day you told me the van was all I deserved, that my children and I deserved nothing good." Her sister-in-law's gaze flickered to the gold-lettered sign above the counter, then to the gold-plated pen Evelyn used for receipts. The realization struck her like lightning. "I'm afraid," Evelyn continued, her voice firm but not cruel, "that I don't have room." Silence stretched between them. Her father-in-law opened his mouth, then closed it. Without another word, they turned and walked out. The little bell above the shop door chimed as they left, sounding more like punctuation than music. Evelyn exhaled slowly. It wasn't revenge she tasted. It was freedom. That evening, as the sunset bathed her shop in gold, she sat at the counter. Rose, her newborn, slept peacefully in a woven basket. Marcus doodled in his notebook nearby. Through the shop window, Evelyn's gaze fell on the van still parked in its spot. To any passerby, it looked worthless, an old rust bucket that should have been hauled to the junkyard years ago. But Evelyn knew the truth. That van had given her everything. Not just the gold hidden inside its panels, but the strength to start again, to believe in herself, and to show her children that dignity cannot be stolen. And you know what strikes me most when I think about Evelyn's journey? Her in-laws believed they had humiliated her beyond repair. They believed the rusty van was the perfect symbol of her downfall. What they didn't realize was that the very thing they mocked became her salvation. Isn't it ironic how life works that way? The objects others laugh at may carry the seeds of our greatest victories. So the next time someone tries to hand you something worthless, ask yourself, are you sure it's worthless? Or could it be hiding the key to your freedom? Evelyn never needed revenge. She built something greater, roots of her own, stronger and deeper than anything her in-laws could destroy. And through it all, she taught us one undeniable truth. Sometimes the gold is hiding in the rust.